has been a library technology executive, serving as a founder and CEO of Skilltype. I'm gonna use the paper because he has some history. Good history, but he has some. So prior to Skilltype, Tony served as inaugural entrepreneur in residence for Boston University Libraries, advised the senior leadership on talent, future of work. For 9 years, he held roles where he consulted library leaders across 6 continents. And recently, he has just moved his offices here to Baton Rouge for Skilltype. He has recently raised $1.1 million, and we are really excited to have him. So Tony, welcome to the stage.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
All right. So to start, to get things kicked off, we have an understanding that you've been in the library industry, that right now you run Skilltype. Let's go before that a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how we got to this point where you're now running Skilltype and living in Baton Rouge?
Sure. Where do I start? I guess 2007, I graduated from college. I studied philosophy and English. Didn't know anything about tech, computer science, engineering, anything, but I knew how to ask questions. And my first job out of college was in Menlo Park, California as a consultant. And my job was to learn about people who were trying to enter into the tech industry and help place them into tech companies. And so that was sort of my professional introduction to the world. And for those of you who haven't been to Silicon Valley, it's a place that spans over 20 cities. And every coffee shop you go to, every restaurant you go to, you're gonna see someone that looks like they're trying to solve a big problem, and they don't care about anything else happening around them. At some point, it's gonna strike your curiosity on like what they're working on, what are they building, why do they have a laptop out in a restaurant? And eventually, you'll start to figure out like, okay, these are the folks that are building the apps we use every day. They're trying to solve problems. And so eventually, it doesn't really matter what your path was to get there, but you'll start to catch the bug. And I started to get interested in what ideas I had. The 9 to 5 I was working was pretty slow. And so inevitably, after hours and on weekends, you're trying to figure out what are some ways you can get in on all this fun that's happening. And I started to consult. This was at the time when social media was starting to come about, and LinkedIn's right in Mountain View, like 5 minutes away from where I'm working. Facebook doesn't have a headquarters yet. They're still like just plopping down in different office buildings until they outgrow it. Then they go to the next one. Then they outgrow that one. Then outgrow that one. And so I winded up putting together a pitch deck for my first company. I didn't know what I was doing. The pitch deck was 72 slides long. For those who are involved in investing, you could kind of appreciate the humor in that. But you got to start somewhere. And fortunately, I had a mentor that was willing to work with me and had grace and didn't make fun of me or shoo me away. He actually read the whole thing and kind of coached me on how we can make it shorter. And that was kind of my introduction to the Valley and to tech. And that particular idea I had didn't wind up going anywhere, but it made me realize that anyone who wants to solve a problem, you can try. And that was sort of the beginning of the journey. Once you get the bug, it's only a matter of time before you try again. So
I love that. So it's funny you say 72 pages, 72 slides. I just really put out a template for the 6-slide pitch deck.
Wow. I wish I had it.
Now I know to have it, right? Because I was in the same boat. We made pitch decks be 10, 20, 30, not knowing. But in that time, so you're talking about a time in Silicon Valley where things had really not grown to the extent that we've seen today, right? I mean, you're talking about Facebook didn't have an office, and I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit. Like, that how when you're seeing other people, like that kind of culture that was there, how they went from, we don't have to get into specifics, but how they went from where they were, where you were there, to where they are today. And I think we talked about this just a little bit in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
But it was people like you were working 9 to 5, and now all of a sudden you want to approach it,
And it was creating an environment where everyone, no matter their background or skin color, could feel like they had what it took to participate. And I never felt ostracized or like I wasn't good enough. I could ask questions and get the answers I wanted. I could participate in conversations. And I remember going to Stanford uninvited, just showing up to random events. Every night of the week, there's some type of event happening. It doesn't matter. It could be in Redwood City, Sunnyvale, Burlingame, towns we've never heard of. There's something happening. And the reason it got that way is because the currency of the Valley is ideas. And so very, very few people that I ever met there are born and raised there. They come from around the world because they want to participate in that. And so, little backstory, my dad's sister, my aunt, bought a home there in the early 80s. And when you listen to her tell stories about what San Jose was like at that time, there was no tech companies around. There were orange groves, garlic farms. Most of the towns were sleepy little, cottage towns. And that was what it was like. Yeah. The 101 wasn't as busy. The 280 wasn't as busy. You had Stanford, you had these places, but it was a pretty sleepy place. Yeah. And it reminded me of the commute we take when we drive from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans, and so I've made this commute a bunch of times, and it's not that different. And that was in the 80s. And so if you fast forward 30 years to 2010, where like the reality TV show we see about the Valley is, that's a single generation. Yeah. That it made this transformation. And that's how I feel about Southeast Louisiana. I think we have all the raw ingredients to make a transformation. I think the key is going to be for people who are in positions of influence to be open to our currency transitioning from things like personal background and demographics into a currency that's based on ideas.
Yeah. So can I ask you what you think helps us make that transition? Because I'll put this on the backdrop of we were just at a ecosystem building meeting just last week where that's actually where I met Mary, and we brought in every organization in town, and we were lucky enough from Startup to be there and have a conversation around what is our perception of the problem and how can we all play different roles. So it feels like we're trying to mold it by force. Did you see that happening in Silicon Valley, or do you see any pathways for us to? We're not trying to be the next Silicon Valley. Let me say that.
And I don't think we should be.
I don't think we should be either.
No.
But are there ways that we can become a place where ideas, it's idea generated, it's idea motivated?
Yes, and I think it's already happening. Again, being from New Orleans and deciding to base Skilltype there for the past 3 years, but physically living and paying taxes and raising my children here in Baton Rouge. Yeah. And always trying to tease out the boundaries of I guess I would describe it as there's a lot of colloquialism and parochialism in our region. Right now, when you want to get to...
Wait. If you're wondering what that means, I also asked him that question. Would you mind sharing for anyone that doesn't know what those two things mean?
Colloquialisms, as in like the local lingo we use, you can tell whether someone's from New Orleans or Baton Rouge. I'm not from Baton Rouge. I pronounce it Baton Rouge. People from here pronounce it Baton Rouge. So that's like one example. You could tell the difference based on the accent. Parochialism, I grew up Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic, but it's a religious term that could also be applied outside of religion. And so there's these different sort of groupings we form ourselves in. And Baton Rouge and New Orleans are very much subject to that gravity of parochialism. Right now, if you're in New Orleans, the currency is, if you want to get to know the quickest way to figure out if someone's from there is to ask them what high school they went to. It's like the most efficient path. And if someone struggles to answer that, it's like instant. Baton Rouge has its own version of that, right? Like we can vet out if someone went to Catholic High or they went to U High, and if not, you're put into a separate category, right? And these types of like ways we build relationships aren't really present in Silicon Valley. Because that's not a multi-generational community.
Yeah.
Most people there came there within the past generation. And so
they're asking, what are you doing? What are you building?
What do you do is the
here?
first question, right? And so your identity is linked to your vocation and your work. And I think just acknowledging that, instead of like saying whether it's wrong or right, just acknowledging it, I think is some progress. And so I push back on it every time I'm sort of dragged into those semantics. And I try to shift the conversation into what are you doing, or what are you interested in doing? And in 5 minutes in an elevator pitch, let me try to figure out if I can be helpful along your path to doing whatever it is you're trying to do, whether that's through making a connection or through sharing some ideas or experiences, handing out a business card, which is a pre-COVID practice, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But actually, one, I realized I probably need business cards, because at that event, everyone asked me for one. I'm like, I don't believe in them. Like, how do I answer this question? I was lazy because I can't say that. I didn't bring them. No, I don't do them anymore. So you're back. Let's talk about now where, because actually we can come back and kind of wrap up around Baton Rouge. You're back in Baton Rouge. You're in the library business.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem very startup-y. That doesn't seem very flashy.
Not yet.
Can briefly talk about maybe how you got into libraries, but I would really love to know about the origins of Skilltype, because a lot of what we're going to talk about the rest of the night is about how you're building your expertise around this domain, but tackling something bigger than I think many of us see.
Yeah, my third job in my career, I got recruited to leave San Francisco. The president of this tech company I was working at left and went to a company based in Boston. And this company was a library technology company. I wasn't aware that there was an industry known as library technology. I knew about libraries as a kid. We had like the Pizza Hut Book It Club. If you read a book, right? Shout out to Book It. Anybody shout out to Book It, right? You can read a book and write a book report and you get a free personal pan pizza. And as an 8-year-old, that's like, it doesn't get more awesome than that. And so, but that's all I really knew about libraries until I got to college, went to the library to study, write papers and things. But I never really knew there was an industry. I just thought it was this magical place that just automatically worked, not realizing that there were people and large budgets. And so I get recruited to work for this company. They fly me and my wife out to Boston. We had never been. They timed the visit pretty perfectly. It was like Columbus Day, October. All the foliage is changing. And we're like, yeah, just sign us up. Nothing else matters. This is a beautiful place. But we go, and I start working for a company called Ex Libris. And this company founded the industry that we now know today as library technology. And so the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Israel, the software developers who worked there in the 80s created this technology called the integrated library system. And it basically allowed the library world to transition off of the Dewey Decimal System card catalog and move to an online format for how we organize books. And that was in the early 80s. And they decided to commercialize that product. And it started this whole new industry that we know as library technology. And that industry now has become a $30 billion industry across the world. Some people struggle to figure out how there's that much money involved in libraries, but if you just take a step back and consider how now there's libraries in every neighborhood. Even our home library here has 16 branches across the East Baton Rouge Parish.
We have 16 branches here?
We do.
Wow.
We do.
Sorry, Mary.
Yeah. 2 are off-site. And
Don't sell yourself short. That's 14 is still a lot.
Yeah, so, but then also consider every college and university has a library, right? Every state has a library that manages the archives and history of that state, right? And then imagine that across about 200 countries, right? And that's a lot of people and processes and workflows that have to manage information. And it's grown to become a pretty large industry that's pretty stable as well.
Yeah.
The Department of Labor estimates that information professionals as a career and vocation will grow by 5% in the next 10 years. And so we need actually more people to help us manage the amount of information that we have as we try to find out, if I want to do anything really, if I want to figure out how do I pay my taxes, right? There's librarians to help us with that process. If I want to do a home reno project, you can go to your library and they'll help you figure out where to start. And so these organizations are super special. They're everywhere. It's one of the last spaces in society that's free, where you can go and sort of get what you need with no expectation of paying or you can just show up and have your information needs met. And so that's something that I wasn't really aware of before that first job. And it turns out that we're at a point in the history of that profession that I'll describe as sort of this digital shift, where the skills that those people need to do their work are drastically changing right before our eyes. And so when people go to the library to get their needs met, it's no longer asking to be pointed in the right direction of a book that's on a shelf. It's now having to navigate hundreds of different databases and online websites to find the right link to a full text article that could be on any topic under the sun, right? So we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and few people know that a lot of the progress we're making on getting to the solution to how to solve COVID is being managed by a library. And so Johns Hopkins University Libraries partners with the epidemiology program and others to create this real-time data dashboard around COVID-19. That's work that's being done in the library. Right, and so libraries are these fascinating places and spaces in society that can respond to whatever our needs are in real time.
So a couple things on this. So one, again, libraries. When we were talking, one of the things that struck me was you said there isn't a library that I can get on a call with, and I don't know the answer to the question. Like you talked very strongly about your domain expertise around libraries.
Yep.
Now, the job in Boston, that was your first job around libraries?
Yep.
Okay. Following that, I'm curious, was it intentional? Did it become like, was it just the interest of hey, you know what? Libraries, like they're doing something great. I enjoy being in it, and because part of the conversation tonight is about domain expertise.
Yep.
And something we went back and forth on, and where I honestly have opposing views. I think anyone can do anything, right? I believe technology removes the barrier of having to be a domain expert. But I believe you disagree. But I think you have great reasons for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit about how you stayed in the libraries and then the actual point where we started Skilltype?
Yeah, I had already bitten the startup bug by the time I found out about the magical world of libraries. And so I'm always trying to figure out how to improve things, how to make things better. And I had spent years at that point now in this industry building relationships, learning about this this fascinating profession in this industry. And so it was natural for me to try to figure out how can I use that to also sort of tease out my entrepreneurial hunger to build something. And so you go to a lot of startup accelerator events or incubator events, and people are trying to figure out where do I start? How do I figure out what I want to build? For me, it was natural to stick with what I knew really, really well, which was library technology. And because of that, I had a competitive advantage knowing, having studied the space, I could rattle off the entire competitive landscape. I could tell you to a T how libraries spend their money down to the percentage. And so it was natural for me to use that to figure out a way to build something new and to solve a problem, as opposed to going with whatever the Joneses are or the more popular wave. Like right now, everyone's into Web 3.0 and NFTs. And I'm like, yeah, that's exciting and new, but I don't know it all that well just yet. This is a space where I have expertise. And so let me figure out how can I build something using this expertise that I have. And so I think that's part of the story, is asking yourself, what are you passionate about? What do you know really well? What sets you apart and what makes you uniquely qualified to build a company? As we start to work with investors, we learn that that's important to them as well. For them to ask the question, why are you the right person to build this company? And you have to have a good answer for that. You have to have the evidence or the receipts for what makes you a person that we should bet on. Because it's a bet investors are making. And so it's a far easier conversation when you can clearly demonstrate your domain expertise in a certain area. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this 10,000 hour rule in order to become an expert at anything. I haven't calculated the number of hours I've spent studying libraries, but after 12 years working with them in 30 countries, I think I'm close.
Yeah. And so the opportunity that you saw in Skilltype was, because I want to jump into that now.
Yeah.
Okay. So, the one way you described Skilltype to me was, helping build a bridge for where libraries and the library staff and those people operating libraries today are and where they're going to be. So you've already recognized that we're making huge leaps. Meanwhile, some of us haven't even, you were talking about Web 3. Some of us haven't even figured out what Web 2 is yet, right? And as soon as Web 3 came out, everyone's like, wait, what's the difference? What's the 2? I didn't know there was a 2. I thought that was just the web.
Yeah.
When you started attacking that problem, how targeted was it? Where is it today? And where are you trying to take it?
Yeah, so this started at a lunch I had with a librarian named Dr. Sylverna Ford. She's retired now, but she was the library director at the University of Memphis. And we were having a lunch, and I asked, it wasn't a work conversation, I just asked, what keeps you up at night professionally? And she said, my people, my staff, being able to train, make sure they have the right skills they need, making sure that I can pay them enough, making sure as people retire, we have the support to serve our communities. Making sure we can recruit a diverse staff because our staff needs to reflect the patrons we serve. And she went on and on and on with all these people-related issues. I had come out of a company and where we were not focused on that problem. We were selling research databases and software tools to help libraries manage collections. And so she exposed me to this whole other area that was a huge problem. And it turned out that was actually the largest expenditure in the library budget. So if you look at where libraries spend their money, the biggest place they spend money is on their most important asset, which is people, right? But this was just so happened to be the biggest problem they had. And so I got super intrigued by that. It was a full circle moment because my first job out of college was doing human resources consulting. And so I was having this full circle moment, and I went off on a 9-month research process just to sort of confirm some assumptions I had and ask some questions. And
if I can interject, you were still at your job at this point, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I didn't really have an idea for what a company would be or if there could be a company. I was just super curious about this problem she was facing that I later confirmed was something that every library around the world, over 2 million of them, were facing. And so then that got me inspired to figure out, okay, I have this question that I now have an answer to, which is, how could we use technology to help libraries manage people better? And so it went from identifying a problem to translating that into a question that you can try to answer. And I winded up building this community of people to help me solve this problem. And so I spoke with probably over 300 libraries, and 9 of them agreed to help me do some research and development. And so they gave us $1,000 a month to prototype different software tools to help wrap our arms around this problem of people management in libraries. That was in 2018.
Yeah.
And since then, that community has grown from 9 libraries to about 50, 1 country to 4 countries. And now it's this global community that's trying to figure out a more specific question. How do we prepare this profession for 2030 and beyond? And so we've since commercialized this prototype that we had, and it's become a product, a software as a service product that we can sell to libraries. And the platform is fairly simple. It helps libraries understand what are the skills I have inside of my organization. Today, we actually just announced that the East Baton Rouge Parish Libraries is the newest Skilltype customer. And they have over 400 employees across these 14 to 16 branches. The problem we're helping them solve is to identify what are the skills we have across all these people. And as a result of that, we can figure out where are our skill gaps, right? And so in large organizations, it's one thing to launch these job searches. It's another thing to pay for all these trainings. None of it really matters if you don't know where your skill gaps are. You could be wasting all your money unless you can verify that. And so it's a data platform that helps kind of surface these insights and create personalized training plans for every employee to help close those gaps. So the idea is that every library around the world needs to close these skill gaps if they want to continue serving their communities and meeting their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so actually, before we get into the next part, I think this is an interesting topic about you've really identified your niche. I mean, look, he's like, yeah, I know, I have. I'm curious, if show of hands, how many people in here know their niche? Like, no, this is who I am. Like, if you have to say, hey, I mean, he's like, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is what I focus on. I told Tony this when we were talking. I made the very cringeworthy move on Twitter to put in my Twitter bio that I'm the hashtag, not hashtag, the in quotes, the networks guy. Because what I'm realizing is like, to your point, and this is what really attracted me to this conversation, is that you start looking at the things that you've done, the things that you're pursuing, and it's like every single one of them. And for me, that was, because when you said you had like so many years in libraries, how many years now?
13.
13.
Yep.
I was like, I started looking back at what things I've done. I was like, everything I've done is about connection networks. Like, even the where I'm interviewing for today is connection networks. Every aspect of it, and And I only started becoming like empowered by that in the last 3 months. And it was like a perfect intersection to meeting you, because Tony walks up to me, he's like, I'm Tony, I do libraries. And I'm like, cool, Tony. Like, what else, Tony? Like, he's like, I crushed it at libraries. I'm like, tell me more. Like, and so for, is there a way that, some of like us, someone that maybe doesn't know, like, hey, this is my niche, this is the thing that I'm going after, for them to discover it? Like, was there, did you ask yourself, just like, Tony, do you really want to do libraries? Did that ever cross your mind, or were you just rolling with it?
No, I think I'm 36, and my 20s were spent becoming really, really, really good at something.
Yeah.
And I think it's important not to try to get this expertise or try to find a niche overnight. It takes time, and it may take a decade. It might take 10,000 hours. Yeah. But I do believe that there's something for everyone to spend 10,000 hours on, and you're going to be so passionate about it that it doesn't even feel like it. Because it doesn't feel like it for me. And I think it's just combating that urge to want to arrive at a destination overnight, and just understanding that it takes time. I had to learn this over the course of that period. It was difficult starting my career in the Valley and seeing TechCrunch articles about these Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Zuckerberg-esque prototypes of people who 21 found their thing at 21 and could raise, $1 billion to go after it from an idea they had at 21. And if you're surrounding yourself with those people pursuing that, you'll start to think that that is the way and that's the only way. When in reality, the data shows that that's the exception to the rule. Harvard Business Review puts out a number of articles that are talking about the average age of finding your niche. And one particular one that talks about the average age of a CEO that takes an IPO being in their mid-40s, which is a counter narrative to what you see with the headlines, especially if TechCrunch is dominating all of these publications and it's syndicated across every startup, email lit newsletter and everything. And so that gave me some confidence that, it's okay that I didn't figure it out right out of college. Before college, they even dropped out of college, and that is glorified. Like, drop out of college if you have that idea. And the number of people who've done that and successful are extremely rare. You could probably count them on one hand, like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Evan Spiegel with Snapchat, and maybe can we name any others?
No.
It's like 3 of hundreds of successful tech companies. But it took me to realize that, to not put that pressure on myself, that it's okay if I'm learning during my 20s and I'm mastering my craft, I'm studying, I'm apprenticing, I'm shadowing someone who has real expertise. It's okay if I don't know anything. It's okay to ask questions. I don't have to front like I know everything. And it's okay if I have this imposter syndrome. Yeah. And it's okay to sit in that space for 10 years. As long as I'm doing my job, I'm working hard, I'm studying, because there's this other decade, you're gonna enter in your 30s, where you'll be able to use that expertise and things are gonna start to come naturally to you. Like, I don't have to study libraries anymore. I really understand them. I can talk to anyone, any position, but I wasn't in that space 10 years ago. And so there's this unceremonious transition to that new stage. No one's gonna, celebrate with you that you've made it, but you will make it. Yeah. And once you get to that point, you'll feel like you're in a position to start solving problems. But it's not overnight.
You think you've made it?
I think I've made it.
Okay, well, we're here to celebrate with you.
Awesome.
So cheers to you, okay?
Awesome.
Yes.
I think I've made it.
You say something interesting about, being okay with hey, this is the process, I'm learning. If any of you were here just last year, I think in March and April, I was up here and we had the conversations I was having with the founders that were so kind to come up was about our fundraising process. And one thing that, was very hard to bring out was that imposter syndrome. We failed. We hit 35% of our, what we were trying to hit. And we're like, well, you know what? It's not going to work with 35%. And then only recently have I gained that kind of mindset where it's like, it's okay to be on your way. We are all on our way. If you look at Twitter too much, you see all these people that have been to YC, done this, raised 10 million. You think you need to do it by 25. And I think, I think a lot of people, how many people are, if you want to say, under 30 in this room? A lot, over half it looks like, right? Just last week when we were at that meeting, Mary, Chris, you guys were there. There was a moment where we were talking about age, and Kenny brought up his age. Kenny Wynn. And all of a sudden he's like, I think he's like 30, 32. And I looked around and I was like, I'm the youngest in the room by 4 years. But even then, so I just wanted to take that moment to say this because I think us as founders, we're in a small city. Sometimes it feels like we're a big fish in a small pond, but it does not take away the fact that we may think to ourselves, we're not doing enough. We're not successful enough. We're not far enough. And the reason I'm saying that, because this is the first time I'm actually sitting up here since last March. And I'm saying that to be very transparent and open because last March I was sitting up here hiding all the emotions. Everything was underneath. And I was, and Scott, my co-founder right there, who, God, bless you for going through it with me. But we have everything underneath and we pushed so hard because I didn't have the mindset, this could take a long, long time. We said, we got to get it done now. And we got to do it big now. And that hurt us. Yep. But you have reached there. And that's why you're up here. And I'm very excited to be talking to you. So the next step in this, and I wanted to share it because I think it's important. Mm-hmm. The next step in this is that congratulations on your $1 million raise in November. Can you share a little bit more about the round? And then I do have some questions about actionable things that steps that you took to raise that money that some of us may learn from.
Yeah, we started a fundraise last spring after bootstrapping Skilltype for about 2.5 years. It wasn't my goal to raise money. I know other founders, I've coached them through working for different accelerators to help these founders on enterprise sales strategy. And so I've probably coached 60 different founders by this point, one-on-one coaching. And when I got to last year and starting Skilltype, I didn't want to raise money. Because when you raise money from outside investors, you are giving away the ownership in your business, and you're all of a sudden back in the situation you were in before you started the company, which is you're an employee of this new company. Your title is just a CEO, but you're working for these investors to provide a return on their investment. I didn't want to do that. And it turned out that I wound up doing it, and I have a more nuanced view and approach now that I would recommend people consider, which is my focus was to build a business, not a product, but a business, and to have the business be making money. And I told myself that if I couldn't make money from whatever it was that I was offering, it's not a business and investors won't invest in it. And so if I just focus on growing a business, creating something that's of value and making money for it, it's going to be a win-win. Either I'm going to make enough to grow and keep running the business on my own, or I'll be making money. And if I want to raise investment, I can, and I'm going to be a better investment candidate because I'm making money. And so by sort of psyching myself out and focusing on not talking to investors for 3 years, and just really wrestling in this space of how do I create value and build a business, it winds up paying off either way down the line. And so fast forward to 2021, I was wrapping up my ERR role at Boston University. That was a 2-year residency. And I knew that I would have to find a way to pay my salary and my healthcare after that residency ended. That residency had an end date, and I got a phone call from one of the CEO. Her name's Sabrina Short. She's based in New Orleans. She runs a community called Nola Bay Black. And she just calls me one day on schedule and asks if we're raising money. And I had to get myself out of my normal sort of like knee-jerk answer of like, no, we're not raising money. Of, you know, this is an interesting time. Yes, I'm open. Why do you ask? And it turned out that she wound up having a conversation with an investor who was looking for companies like mine. And so that was on a Monday. She does the email intro on a Tuesday. I send a deck on a Tuesday to Skilltype. We have a Zoom call on a Wednesday, and I have a term sheet on a Thursday.
Wow.
And that wouldn't have happened if my intention when I had this idea was to just raise money. And so I think one of the lessons I learned and sort of from that was because of TechCrunch and other like press outlets that glamorize fundraising as an end unto itself, it's conditioned this generation of entrepreneurs that we're in that fundraising is the goal. And that once you fundraise, that's the goal. Whereas my perspective is if you raise money, you're just putting gas in your tank, but you still need to have a destination in mind of where you're driving to. And so it's good to have gas in the tank, but the question is where are you headed? And so it wound up working out perfectly, but we weren't out pitching. I don't have a story like, oh, I pitched 300 investors and we wound up getting 10. Like, no, it sort of fell in our lap because my focus was I wanted to talk with as many libraries as I could. I wanted to understand their problems as deeply as I could. And I wanted to surround myself with a team of people who were as passionate about them as I was. And we did that for 3 years.
Wow. Yeah. Do you think, when you talk to your investors, how much do you think that approach influenced you getting the money? Obviously, and I think investors are out there to invest. Like that's what they do. They have capital. They need to distribute that capital in some way. Like they're not sitting there in their high tower holding like they need to go out and do it. Yep. And so this investor comes out with the intention, behind what he does and to invest. How much do you think that history that you had in libraries, the way you had set up Skilltype, and your experience influenced the decision making? And I'm curious about, wait, before we get into that, how many pages was the deck?
9.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's better.
Yeah. It was better than my first one.
Yeah. Wow. What growth?
Yep.
How much of that was about you and your background? How much of it was about the company?
The deck itself?
Yeah.
Only about 2 bullets on me.
Okay. So there was the introduction. I guess the premise of the question is how much did they invest? Do you believe in you versus the company?
Got it. So the deck itself only had 2 bullets about Tony. Okay. It was about this really big problem about that we wanted to solve and our unique approach to doing that. And we've built a team. And so that was the deck. I think the investment decision that they've kind of told me afterwards, it had a lot to do with me. I mean, I've had a recent conversation with one of our investors that said, we decided to invest in you. Skilltype may not work. It might not be what you expect it to be, but we trust that you will figure it out because of the work you've put in. And so, seed stage companies and companies that are perhaps pre-revenue or just early revenue, investors are making a decision in the person and the people that are pitching. The most famous example of this is Instagram, and Kevin Systrom and his founders, they were working on this pitiful excuse of an app called Bourbon, B-U-R-B-N, and it was like a geolocation app that was like competing with Foursquare, and it was hot trash. It was a super crowded space.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a reflection on Kevin Systrom and his founders. That was their first idea that brought that team together. And they realized that the most popular feature of that app was the photo uploading piece. And they were smart enough to understand that that's worth digging into. And that's where Instagram came from. But that first idea they had wasn't anything impressive. It was, and so that's now they wound up selling to Facebook for, I think it was $1 billion, and they only had 11 people working for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even that was a big call. Like I was listening to the backstory on that just recently, how I didn't realize they bought Instagram in the same year that they were IPOing, and I didn't realize that they spent over a quarter of their on-hand cash on Instagram before they IPO'd. Like, they put their IPO in risk doing that, or Mark did, right? And there was this connection he had to the founders that I guess some of those stories are just coming out, but I found that so fascinating that he was willing to take that big of a risk on an unproven, no revenue generating company, but clearly he was onto something, and clearly he won.
Yeah, and this is the other side of the coin on the domain expertise conversation, is if you build up enough legitimate expertise in a domain, that is the criteria for an investor investing in you and your idea, is that you've actually done it and you can demonstrate it. And so can you educate an investor about a new market or industry they had no idea about? If they go off and send their analysts to do research on that space, is it going to confirm what you said, right? And if you prove to them that you are the woman to do that or the man to do that, they'll write you a check because you're the one who's going to be the closest to solving that problem. And if it's in a space that's big enough and popular, like something like Web3, investors just simply want to get into the game. It's having that domain expertise and being able to communicate it, improve it, I think is the majority of the decision-making criteria for an early stage company. Later stages, it really just comes down to a financial model you can present and back up. But early days, they're investing in us.
So one more question. So in terms of when we talk, we talked about Skilltype almost being an unbundling of current tools and products that are out there, unbundling them and targeting them towards libraries because you are the person to do that, right? If for anyone out here considering a new idea or considering targeting their niche focus, subject matter, whatever that may be. Can you talk a little bit about how they may look at unbundling, current products, current tools today, and offering that? And obviously, it's not the exact same,
Yeah.
Like, Salesforce is a ton of things, but there's also new CRM tools coming out daily, targeting new industries. And I think this is one thing that's interesting is that you found a way to do that, and you have big plans coming up. But can you maybe advise us on a little bit on like, how someone will go about finding, finding a solution within their niche?
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of the software industry. It's all I've ever worked in.
Okay.
I don't know much about services or other things, but in software, if you look at every software company that's the name of, specifically business to business software companies, as opposed to like business to consumer companies, they fall into one or two categories. Those B2B companies are either they made their success from taking a bunch of disparate workflows and bundling them together. So like a bunch of annoying tasks that people have and putting them all into one app or experience. Or the opposite. They unbundled this user experience that's gotten too bloated and too large and too unwieldy. And so those are the two options you have to build a successful business to business company. You're either unbundling something or you're bundling something together. The whole point is to make it easier for someone to complete a task, or a company or an organization to complete a task. And I read about this when I was just working a 9-to-5 in the Valley of Craigslist. And so the most famous example from 2005 to 2010 of a company that got unbundled is Craigslist. And so how many of you are familiar with Craigslist? I don't know if people still use it, but Craigslist was a classifieds ads website. Craig Newmark started this website. It doesn't have any styling or CSS. It's just plain text links. And it began to do a little bit of everything. You could buy a dog on Craigslist. You could rent an apartment. You could buy a car. You can sell whatever. And it started to get so much traffic and so many transactions that you could even post jobs on Craigslist. You can literally do everything. But it got so big that companies, other founders started to realize, well, I could probably create a better experience for this little segment of people or buyers if I just took that one feature off and understood more about that community and built something just for them, right? And so there's over a dozen billion-dollar companies that were created from unbundling Craigslist. Airbnb is one of them, right? It took the whole short-term rental and leasing piece of Craigslist, and they said, we're gonna do a much better job at them. We're gonna get professional photographers to photograph the apartment. We're gonna tell you information about where you're gonna go eat once you're checked into the apartment. And that winded up becoming a far better experience than doing that on Craigslist. Uber winded up doing the same thing from finding drivers on Craigslist to come pick you up from the airport. And so that's an example of something that got unbundled and created a bunch of value.
And I think that plays to what you're, like libraries probably found software that probably could find software, but like it's made for businesses, but it's not made for them.
Right.
Like, this Uber, Airbnb, I mean, there's those, apps you can find photographers, apps you can find dog walkers. I mean, and all of these, right? There's probably a cupcake app, I'm sure. There's all these little ways that I think a lot of us can go and I wonder if before there was the crawfish app, I wonder if there was crawfish on Craigslist. I wonder if there was a category. There might have been.
I'm sure you could meet someone in a Walmart parking lot to buy a pound of crawfish on Craigslist. Like that,
Maybe.
I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so for us, when we were starting Skilltype, that unbundling had already happened, but I studied it and knew I developed a mental model for this idea of unbundling versus bundling. LinkedIn was the version of this when I was founding Skilltype, where it had become all things to all people related to talent management, and so much so that it became a master of none. When I learned about this problem libraries were facing and that they were using LinkedIn to post jobs, they were also using LinkedIn Learning to train employees. None of those were amazing experiences, but that was what was available at the time. And so I was a part of and I am a part of the class of founders that is unbundling LinkedIn for a very specific niche. And the niche is large enough to build a viable, sustainable business and create jobs. But that mental model I developed came from understanding the history behind Craigslist. So the easiest analogy for Skilltype is like LinkedIn, but specifically for libraries.
Yeah.
And that's a bit into the roadmap we have for the future as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and this is something that, this conversation, we keep going. I think this, so we're at about the end here. I'm going to ask a few questions wrapping up. What's the best tool you've ever used for startups, for your startup?
I mean, the easy answer is Google Suite.
Yeah.
You can do everything with a $5 subscription to Google that you need to.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's not an exciting answer, but
no, it's good.
It's everything we do is on it.
Yeah.
I would have said Slack, but that's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any no-code tools? Are you in no-code at all?
Yep.
Okay. Favorite no-code tool?
So WordPress.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the first version of Skilltype was a WordPress blog where we allowed librarians to create a WordPress page on the blog where they described the skills they had, which were WordPress tags. And we allowed a library to search by tag to find experts in the library.
You really hacked it.
Yeah, and I built it myself. And
love that.
And that allowed us to get our first customer paying $1,000 a month.
Love that.
Yeah.
Shane, of course.
And I'm not a coder, so.
Hey,
yeah.
I get it. I'm not a coder either, but now it's changed. No code has changed everything.
Yep.
That's a whole conversation itself. Okay, gonna turn here.
Yep.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Sushi or tacos?
Do I have to choose?
You do. I'm gonna just. It is Taco Tuesday, but I just
street tacos from Superior.
Okay. Good work.
Yeah.
Best. Oh wait. What's your favorite local restaurant?
Superior Grill.
Okay. Staying truth. I see it. Staying true to the. Last thing before we open up Q&A, what is something that you would want to leave the founders here today or the aspiring entrepreneurs that have joined us, both here and the ones that will listen to this later?
To take your time. There's no rush, despite what the news or the media says. Take your time and don't feel pressure to put on a front like you have it all figured out. Most of us don't. And acknowledging that sooner than later will just help other people want to help you figure it out. Everyone just wants to be helpful, and if we project that we have it all figured out, they'll move on to figure out who can they help next. And so just asking more questions than making statements, and just taking your time, going really deep on whatever it is you're passionate about, and instead of trying to be a master of a little bit of everything. Yeah.
I love that. All of this is, this conversation, I think, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. We are very excited to have you here in Baton Rouge. We're excited for what's next for Skilltype. I can't thank you enough for being here. So if we could all please give a big round of applause for Tony.